Alan Hayes, welcome to Milestone Bellanova.
My pleasure.
We thank them and thank you for turning up for Business Insider.
My pleasure, Mark. My pleasure.
Okay. And Alan Hayes, usually I introduce it whether you're in HR or whether you're in advertising communications, whether you're in IT. How do you describe what Alan Hayes does?
Well, I'm a refugee from the advertising industry.
Aren't we all?
Yes. But look, when I was very young as a teenager, I became very much influenced by my grandmother, what she did. She was a herbalist, and my family tended to be looked at as the strange people on the block because we did things different. And sustainability or being self-sufficient always appealed to me because I've never been one of those people that wants to be beholden to anybody, including governments, corporations. I like to be my own person. Consequently, 19 and a half, I was running my own show, ended up in advertising, but then realised that there was a better life. I was very much influenced by a show on TV called The Good Life, where it was self-sufficiency in suburbia. But I wasn't interested in that, so I bailed out to the Duralong Valley 32 years ago to have a more sustainable lifestyle, which I've done, and become more in touch with the environment, to do your own thing, but of course not lose those corporate roots.
But you took your grandmother's passion for, I guess, or do I say ancient remedies or
well,
household?
Maybe. They're things that are passed down through the eons, I guess, but I took what my grandmother was doing and turned it into a situation that was applicable then for the 20th century, even more so now for the 21st century, and started putting that into practice. My first book, which was 27 books ago, was published in 1989. I very quickly realised that there was an insatiable thirst out there for people to have knowledge on how to do things that were safer, as far as their health goes, inexpensive, and at the same time doing something good for the environment. That way they could say, hey, look at us, we're greenies, or whatever they wanted to say.
Sustainable.
Sustainable.
At that stage, yeah.
In looking at that, I realised to get that information out there was a need to do it, and I came up with the concept of the It's So Natural column, which actually started in the Express Advocate 21 years ago.
And has spread to where?
Look, it's now worldwide. It's the most widely published and the longest running weekly newspaper and magazine feature in the English-speaking world. I was told it could not be done. I was told by an editor of a newspaper, only overseas columns coming from America or England get published here, but you cannot syndicate this. And my business plan, of course, was to syndicate it around the world, make this information.
So how do you do that, Alan? Do you just say, look, I'm not going to listen to you and I can do this? Did you have a plan, or you just...
Oh yes, I had a plan. Look,
tell me about that. I need to know.
Being a tenacious bulldog, I guess, it's one way to describe it. But I guess it gets back down to being, having a positive mental attitude and believing in your ability to do something. And what I did, I started finding out who the various, in Australia, the newspapers were, who the editors were. And because it was up and running in the Express, I would then send them out an appropriate lead letter just saying blah, 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 blah. And with samples of, well, of course, before the dust was settled, I would be on the phone and talking to them. And selling somebody over the telephone.
So what's that? That's That's a plan to say, yes, I know where I'm going to go. But then it's persistence as well.
It's persistence. You've got to be persistent. And selling somebody over a telephone where you can't eyeball them is probably the most difficult thing in the world because you cannot gauge their reaction. But when people say no, instead of going, oh yes, okay, I would turn that into a positive. If somebody, when I rang up, said, well, no, I'm not interested, I would say, of course you're not interested. I wouldn't be interested in anything either until I at least had the opportunity to see what it was about, and knowing that you're a professional business person or whatever they are in that industry, I know you're prepared to look at it, and all I want is say 5 or 6 or say 6 or 7 minutes of your time, give it an odd amount so that it doesn't register in the brain too quickly.
Yeah.
And they would listen to me, I would get the hearing. Well, once I started talking to them, I would make them an offer on how to go about it that they found acceptable, even if it was, say, on trial for 6 weeks or 8 weeks at no charge, because I knew that once it was in there, they would get the reaction from their
Do we do enough of that? Do we understand, do businesses, and not just on the Central Coast, do businesses understand that they've got to be flexible now like that? Because you were saying, okay, well, it's not $1,000 a week and I don't negotiate, it's kind of, how do I get it there?
Look, I don't think people are. It amazes me that today in business, people won't allow that flexibility. They're more interested in what they can get now instead of looking at how they achieve what they get. And sometimes you've got to give to receive. And that's what I realised I had to do with that. And it worked very, very successfully. And I'm published in the major News Limited.
Well, you're sold
dailies.
to News Limited, not an easy taskmaster.
Well,
Master.
no, look, I've been with News Limited for 16 years, and the Natural Solutions column that's in News was really started the, I guess, helped them launch the Homes magazine in the Telegraph. And it is, without doubt, probably the most popular thing they publish. I don't really want to go there because the questions that I get all the time from people wanting solutions to all and everything is absolutely insane.
Let's move on then, because that ticks over, and that's a major part. It's So Natural is a major part of your life. You've just been awarded a conservation award for the work you put in to.
I've been awarded quite a few conservation awards.
I'm thinking this one is for a single effort.
Yeah, just for a single effort for my contribution to the environment.
Specifically about? Or relating to?
It was relating to the coal fight to protect the water catchment valleys of Wyong. Most people on the Central Coast would be aware that the South Korean government, their mining arm Kores, wanted to build one of the largest longwall coal mines in the world beneath the water catchment valleys at Wyong. Now, those valleys, up until the opening of the Mardi Mangrove pipeline, were providing 53% of the Central Coast water supply. With the pipeline now open and having to draw from those valleys, of course, that escalates to upward 85, maybe 90% of our drinking water is coming from that area. Now,
so what do you draw on to achieve that, the cessation and hopefully the closure of any future development there?
Well,
what were the issues that you faced at a personal level, I guess, a business level?
You run it like a business. Well, I ran the campaign as if I was running a business. You've got to be dedicated, but you've got to bring the right people around you. You've got to raise the money, you've got to get mining engineers, environmental scientists, hydrologists, all these people to prove that that mine was going to destroy the water. You've got to prove
How much did it cost? Can you tell me?
I guess we spent in excess of $100,000. But we had a dinner probably 2-3 years ago, I just can't remember, at the Wyong Racing Club. They gave us the venue for free. It was a who-who of the business community. If the mining company had turned up that night, they would have been demoralised. But that was the whole thing. You engage the community, you engage the business fraternity, you engage local government so they all know that what you're saying is true and come on board, and they all came on board. It was something that's never happened before.
Did you have to be flexible in that, or did they accept everything blindly on what you suggested?
No, when speaking to local government and the businesses, I produced the evidence. They believed what I said. If I said black was green, they were going to accept that because they knew that we did the homework, that the organisation did the homework, and we had the evidence to back it up. We weren't going to get up, or I wasn't going to get up and make statements on television or in the press or on radio that couldn't be verified. And one of the things that Scott Levi on ABC Radio, who's interviewed me many times, has said to me, would you do an open debate with the mining company? And I've said yes, but of course the mining company would always refuse. They wouldn't talk about it publicly on radio because they knew that the claims that they were making could be shot down in an instant.
Yeah, okay. The evolution of Alan Hayes, where do you, is there more of this? Do you want to focus on the environment, or?
Well, I've always been concerned about the environment because I believe that as we go through life, we have to tread gently on this planet. We have an obligation to leave behind for our grandchildren and their children and children after that what we have enjoyed. We have no right to just destroy it. So that's why I'm very passionate about this. In developing It's So Natural, and the company was basically to control what I was doing, the umbrella for it, was to disseminate information so people could adopt that sort of lifestyle. So it still fitted in with what they were doing. You know, I wasn't expecting people to run off to Nimbin and live in a hut or something like that. In their day-to-day life, they could adopt things that were better for them and were better for the environment and were less expensive, as I said before. This is why I've had the body of work that I've written in books. My books are the most successful in their genre in this world. I mean, there is no others that have actually sold the quantities that my books have sold, and it's because people want to know about it, this information. Look, as I go forward, because I do own 2 small community newspapers, and they were part of this evolution. The first one, the Rural Grapevine, which services the rural areas, was set up for a need because people wanting to come into the valleys and destroy the environment, and there was a need to bring the community together, which it successfully did. And because of that, the community defeated Sydney Gas.
Is that a financial model? Is that profitable?
Yes, it is profitable.
Okay, cool.
And I've told other people, if they're going to get out there and fight, they need to do it. But you've got to have the drive, you've got to have the acumen to do it. And people seem to sit around and talk about it, but they won't get off their backsides and do it. Now, the Rural Grapevine was instrumental in bringing a community...
Can I come back? You just said something that twigged, and I've warned you about this before, and that is getting out of the corners. Don't get cornered. To your point,
what it's all about.
It's a lot of talking, but unless you get out of the corners... So do you want to talk about that?
A lot of people tend to get caught in the boxed in. You've got to start thinking laterally, and everyone can think laterally and project yourself. So you get outside the square, get out of those corners, and start doing it. And when you look at what you want to do, instead of looking at it as, say, a great big balloon or something up in the air and thinking, hey, how am I going to achieve this? Break it down into its component parts of what you need to do to bring it together like a puzzle. And once you do that, it is very easy to achieve. And that's what people aren't doing. And this is what I did with those publications. When the coal fight started 5.5 years ago, is why I launched the urban edition of my newspaper, purely then to inform the community about what was happening with the coal fight and bring a community together. And indeed it did that, because Wyong Council did a survey which showed 82% of the Shire was against the coal. And if people start to think a little bit more laterally, started projecting outside that square.
How does that apply to other businesses then?
Well, it doesn't matter what other business you've got. Whatever your game plan is, you must set goals. And what people tend to do, they'll set a goal and say, this is what I wanted to achieve in 5 years. But you won't achieve it unless you know how to go about it. And how you go about it is, again, breaking that down into its component parts about what you've got to achieve each year, each month, each week, and each day. And when you get it down to that basic level, all of a sudden you realise that what you have to achieve each day is so infinitesimal that you can do 2 or 3 times as much. So that goal suddenly occurs in a very short time. And then in the meantime, you reevaluate and keep resetting the goals and keep doing the same thing. So you become very regulated in what you're doing, but you become very successful.
Well, others would suggest focused and progressive. You can actually see that little goal. But does business on the Central Coast, and I'm using it, well, there's small business everywhere, get caught up in the big goal, the big balloon in the sky?
Well, they get caught up in the big balloon. Those that are successful know how to bring that goal down. What you must do is set short-term and long-term goals so that you know what you need to do in the short term, where you want to be in 10 years' time. But where you want to be in 10 years' time, you still won't get there unless you start breaking that down into components.
And do something tomorrow about it.
Well, today actually, you do something today.
I've got some day left, yeah, okay.
And while you're doing that, you must always maintain that focus, have a positive mental attitude, and believe in your ability to achieve. And the one thing that I have found in life is people don't seize opportunities. See, as we go through each day, opportunities present themselves to us, business opportunities. Yeah. Now, a lot of people will look at it and say, oh, that's great.
Is there a reason, is there a generalised reason for rejection of those opportunities, do you think?
I think it's fear, because people look and think, oh, but if I do that, you know, this might happen or that might happen. The thing is, you seize it. Now, it doesn't matter if you fall back on the bones of your backside. All you do is pick yourself up, dust yourself off and start again. And one person that was very successful at doing that was Sir Leslie Hooker. 3 times he fell on his backside, and the 4th time he picked himself up again and went and built an empire.
Well, the great line, it doesn't matter if you fail. There is no failure as long as you're learning on your way through.
That's right.
And indeed, the opportunity is to get back up. Do it quickly.
Or you get up very quickly. And it's the same when you're dealing with people out there. If somebody says no, rather than accept that as rejection, analyse why they've said no and use that as a positive, so the next time you don't get a no, you get a yes. And somebody said to me when I was very young, it is better to spend 4 minutes of your time finding out why somebody doesn't want something than to never know at all, because at least when you know why they don't want it, you know how to overcome the problem.
Indeed. Alan, you're a publisher, or you are published, and there has been a massive change in the way things get from your mind in front of, whether it's an iPad or whether it's is technology impacting your business in that publishing space and that authoring space?
No, technology is not impacting on it. I guess it's making information more accessible to people, but in regards to print and matter, I think people still today like to pick up a book. They like to have it on the bookshelf. They like to be able to open the pages up. Reading the paper, well, yes, a lot of people prefer to do it online because it's easy to do with their iPad, but at the end of the day, the newspapers are still rolling out because people still like to feel it. Human beings are very tactile animals. We like to feel things, and I think part of the experience in reading the news or knowing what's happening is that you've got it in your hand, you're feeling it. It makes it very important. Electronically, I know myself, if I read something electronically, it's very easy to miss. When I write my It's So Natural column every week, I have to print out a hard copy, because even though I can read what I've written on screen, and remembering that when you're writing something it's up here, and sometimes you can miss a word when it goes hits the screen.
It's not real until it's in your hand.
And when it's in my hand and I read it, I'll actually often see a word that I've left out or something like that, which I will not pick up on the screen, because the mind is a very funny thing. You can put a letter in the wrong position, but the brain automatically adjusts and knows what it is that's being said. So when you have a hard copy and you actually see it there printed, it tends to have a different impact on the way you look at it.
Okay, that's cool. Alan, the government has talked about sustainability and leaving the planet in a better shape, and their process is carbon tax linked with mining super tax to provide a fund to reinvest in Australia. Does that gel?
The mining super tax I don't have a problem with. With the carbon tax at the moment, and I've looked at a lot of evidence because I'm very green, I believe in sustainability. They talk about global warming. There's been a lot, we've got satellites running around up there in the sky everywhere. And the one thing they haven't found is the greenhouse signatures that suggest that the planet is warming to create the problems. However, climate change is a reality. Because of the amount of carbon that we are using, we are getting all this crap being deposited on the Himalayan mountains, the Andes, all these places,
Greenland,
which are causing massive ice melts. Now that is going to be a real problem. That will cause the sea level rises and all the rest of it. Introducing a carbon tax on the basis on which we're doing it, which is an enormous amount and it's geared to go up, I think will cause problems, because I see businesses doing one or two things. They'll either go overseas where they don't have to pay it, or they're going to have to pay the cost on back to the consumer. It will eventually get down there, which will make everyday life very expensive. And I don't know whether Australia can afford that. This carbon tax is the most expensive being introduced. And apart from balancing the books for the federal government, it's not going to stop what's happening in China. It's not going to stop what's happening everywhere else. Unless you can get general consensus around the world to bring in some sort of system, and whether it be as a tax, so that people stop using or producing more carbon it's not going to do a lot.
Yeah, the argument is that one of the arguments is Australia is an incredibly rich country. You know, we have an obligation to take a lead on this.
Well, whether we have an obligation to take a lead or not, it is the way in which I think it's being done. I don't think the government has thought it through sufficiently to what the end result can be. I think they're making it too expensive, and ultimately we'll get back to the consumer, because if I'm a business where I'm producing goods that require carbon and I'm paying a tax on it, I'm going to pass that tax on down the line because I'm not going to have my bottom line affected, and I think that's what's going to happen. In regards to a super tax on mining, I think in the mining industry they've had it too easy for too long. They're reaping massive profits and basically paying this country very little. We've sold the farm to overseas investors in regards to mining, and we should be charging a more equitable rate. But I think they're two different issues.
Okay. You may we get on to a rant stage here in an effort to wrap up. We could go on for hours, but is there anything that gets up Alan Hayes' nose right now?
The one thing that gets up my nose that I have an abhorrence for is corporate greed, political greed, and people thinking that they can just come into an area and for greed and avarice alone jackboot their way across communities and their lives and destroy it and leave them in that wake of destruction. Similar to what the mining company wanted to do in the Wyong area. It was all about greed and avarice for them. They did not care about the Central Coast. They didn't care about the people's lifestyles. They didn't care about their health. They didn't care about their water security. They cared about one thing only, and that was the bottom line of the South Korean government. That sort of thing does get up my nose.
And may it stay well enough away from that, because it appears to be there's some discussion going on still about whether they've finished or...
No, look, it isn't going to happen. There's certain things in train which I cannot talk about publicly at the moment because it really wouldn't bode well for myself and other people to have it out there. But that mine will not happen. But when people do that type of thing, to me it's like waving a red flag in front of a bull. If people say you cannot do something, it's the same thing. I say, why? You know, you go and do it. It was like what I said earlier, where people said you cannot syndicate a newspaper column or column worldwide. And I said, why? They said, well, it doesn't happen because no one's done it before. I said, so? That doesn't mean it can't happen.
Indeed. Alan Hayes, it can happen. Thank you for your time.
My pleasure, mate.
Really appreciate it.